Hello, my name is Roisin, and I've heard that intros are not the done thing anymore, but if I don't say my name at the beginning of this video, everyone will be calling me Roisin. So, I'm Roisin. This is a 5-star predictions video. This is a staple of booktube, so you know what's going on. I've got 10 books to talk to you about. The first one is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I mentioned this book in a haul recently, which I'll leave linked in the cards above, and Joan Didion is one of those writers that I hear a lot of people talk about. There is a lot of praise for her and for this book in particular, and she is someone that I want to find out if she is one of my writers. You know, those writers that kind of just work for you, that speak to you, that you feel like are particularly impressive or particularly just fit with your style. And I am looking for more writers that in that non-fiction, in the non-fiction world, that fit that for me. So I'm putting this in this video because clearly I'm assuming that Joan Didion will be one of my writers. But this one is the story of the year where her daughter got very sick and was on life support, and then she lost her husband after he had a massive heart attack. And it's her attempt of dealing with grief, the year afterwards, where she was coming to terms with the grief. It's a fairly simple premise, but I've just heard such wonderful things about Joan Didion as a writer that I'm really hoping that I will enjoy it. And I also just love this edition. I think it's beautiful. I love the pink and orange. So I am really hoping that she will be one of my writers. And I feel like because it's been praised by Zadie Smith, who I've discovered is one of my writers, that it will be. And she's got a lot of writing. She's like from the 60s and 70s, I think. A lot of her famous stuff comes from. This was first published in 2005, but yeah, I think she's well known from the 60s and 70s. I obviously don't know enough about her. American writer, but yeah, I am excited to try her writing for the first time. I've just heard so much praise about it, and fingers crossed it works for me. Someone else who I have recently discovered is one of my writers is Barbara Kingsolver, and I've had the Lacuna sat on my shelves for years. This is ancient, this copy. I believe it is my mum's edition and I stole it from her, but as I said, Barbara Kingsolver is one of my writers. I read the Poisonwood Bible by her more than a decade ago now, and I really loved it, but this year I also read Demon Copperhead, and it's one of my favourite books that I've read this year, so I know I really love her writing. This is a piece of historical fiction, and Poisonwood Bible is definitely historical fiction because it's set in the 50s and 60s in Congo, but Demon Copperhead, you could kind of argue as historical fiction because it's set in the 90s and 2000s, and as someone who grew up then, that does make me feel a little old. But this is her historical fiction set in Mexico in 1935, in the 20s and 30s. Set around the kind of leftist political movements in Mexico at the time and the artistic movements, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, about Harrison Shepherd, who was working in that household, and then Lev Trotsky arrives, who dies with an ice pick to the head, I believe, in Mexico. I think that's, if I'm remembering my history correctly. So I'm sure I will find out when I read this book. I'm actually going to Mexico next year, but I think I'll probably want to read some Mexican writers while I'm there. One that is one of my mum's favourites, and alongside everybody else, is The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. This is one, obviously, that is sort of a classic. It is a African-American classic from 1983, so it is a modern classic, but I think again it is historical fiction. Yeah, about two sisters who share the pain and struggle of growing up as African-American women in the early 20th century. So yeah, it is historical fiction set in the early 20th century, although the epigraph is Stevie Wonder. Yeah, and it's about these sisters and how they protect each other from their violent father and other incidences of violence through a series of letters spanning 20 years. So is this I think this is an epistolary novel, which I haven't read, or epistolary novel. I haven't read a huge amount of them, but like I said, this one has been so well praised, and there's a film with it that stars Oprah, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting into this classic and see what all the hype is about, and I'm sure I will love it just as much as everyone else. One that's for my own book club this year, this is the one that I am most convinced is going to be a 5-star from me, for me. So my book club, if you don't know about it, is the Big Book Club, where we read books over 500 pages. I will leave the playlist linked in the cards above, but July and August we are reading the Shock Doctrine, and my co-host for that is going to be Sunny from a Sunny Book Nook. So there will be a live show where we read this, where we talk about having read this at the end of August. And this is by Naomi Klein, and it is a modern classic of leftist political non-fiction. I've read This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein, which is her book that is much more focused on climate change, whereas the Shock Doctrine is about, I can't remember the term that she uses, but it is about people who capitalise on disasters. Disaster capitalism, that's what it's called. And this is from 2007, so it follows a lot of the major climate, ecological disasters, oil spills. I believe that the, is it Exxon oil spill in Alaska, I think, is covered here. And she talks about the way that people don't, there's not like a conspiracy of people making disasters, but when disasters strike, the rich will get out. Well, the rich will make out with a lot of money. And so obviously this is set pre-financial crisis 2007, 2008, and written pre-COVID and all of the other crises that have happened more recently. But it will, I think, illustrate that. And I really like Naomi Klein's writing. I think she does a really good job of integrating kind of narrative with data, and so I am looking forward to reading this one. This is her most famous book, and I'm looking forward to having a good discussion about this, so feel free to join us. The Discord is in the description, but you don't have to join the Discord, you can just come along and watch at the end of August. This one, Girls Against God, a novel by Jenny Hval, and this has been translated from the Norwegian by Mariam Idris. And this one, my friend Molly Moles by Moonlight over on Instagram, she bought this for me for my birthday last year, and I definitely need to get to it soon. But it is kind of in the vein of the weird girl lit, which is something that I have been reading and enjoying last year, and I'm kind of getting into. That's the kind of more literary horror, the kind of the end of horror that's a bit less gory necessarily. There can be some gore, but it's not really about bloody people with knives chasing people, or like, it's not as jump scary. It's just kind of unsettling and creepy and not necessarily explained, and kind of a metaphor for things. That's kind of the end of horror that I am dipping my toe into, and this one I think I might read fairly soon, because I know obviously October is spooky season where we read spooky reads, but for me there is something about creepy spooky things when it is too hot. I just love reading them in the summer. So this one is set in Norway, and it is in a Christian town. A teenage woman who gives in to the lure of the rebellion offered up by the black metal scene. She moves to Oslo, a site of weird convergences. A coven of witches cook up curses, demons descend on cafeteria, a time-travelling Edvard Munch joins a metal band, closely pursued by his pubescent model, who has murder on her mind. Meanwhile, out in the forest, a group of schoolgirls lose their way and find only terrible strangeness. Awful things happen in Aspek. A fusion of feminist thought and experimental horror. Radical fusion of feminist thought is quite difficult to say, but yes, I'm interested to see that. I love it. Horror can often be used to explore social ideas. I think that's kind of part of the history of horror, and I'm looking forward to reading it here. You can see my mess corner, unfortunately, but just ignore it, it's fine. Another weird one that I know has divided people, so definitely is a bit of a risk putting it on this 5-star predictions video, is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. It is also a kind of weird novel, and this is about two people who go to a holiday home, and then there is a power cut, and these two other people arrive and say that they are the people who own the holiday home, and there is a power outage that has swept through the city, and because there's no phone service and the internet is down, there's no way for them to check what is going on and what has happened in New York. Is their holiday home truly a safe place for their families, and are they safe from one another? I'm intrigued to see this, and I know it's kind of, I think it's more slow moving. I think a lot of people were expecting something like high octane thrillery, but I think it's a lot more slow and a lot more insular than that, which is definitely my preference. A page turner taking in themes of isolation, race and class. Carmen Maria Mercado has said, I have not been this profoundly unnerved since Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. So I think there's going to be some weird, unsettling twist in it, and I am very excited for that. Hopefully I like the writing. That's the main thing that could take it either way for me, I think. The other books that I think will be 5 stars when I read them that I don't actually own. Well, okay, the first one I do own, but I only own in audio, and that is Say Nothing by RaddenKeith. And this is another piece of non-fiction. So again, I know I like RaddenKeith's writing because I read Empire of Pain, the history of the Sackler dynasty, and I really, again, much like Naomi Klein, like the way he weaved personal stories in, although this was more a courtroom drama, and I thought that the way that he got the tension and the dramaticness of all, and the individual people, but also the overarching systemic structure that caused that to happen. I really enjoyed that of Empire of Pain, and so I really want to read Say Nothing as well. So the subtitle of Say Nothing is A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland, and I've talked about several times on this channel how my mum is from Derry, which is the second biggest city in the north of Ireland. And so the Troubles, obviously you probably know the Troubles were a period of unrest in Northern Ireland between the late 1960s and the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. And so my mum was born in Derry in the 1960s, so she lived through all of the Troubles, and most of that in Derry, which was one of the kind of epicenters of the Troubles. So you've got the Nationalists and the Unionists. The Unionists want Northern Ireland to be Britain, the Nationalists want Northern Ireland to be part of Ireland, and the Unionists are mostly Protestant and the Nationalists are mostly Catholic, but it's not actually a religious thing. Never really is a religious thing, is it? It's about power. Say Nothing focuses beginning in 1972 with the abduction and murder of Jean McConville. So yeah, as I said, I want to know more about Northern Ireland, about that period of history. What I know is family stories, which is obviously different than a more rigorous historical narrative. So I want to know kind of more of the background and more of the width of it, rather than just things about tear gas and rubber bullets that I know from my mum. So a book that I see praised on here all the time is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is the first in the Neapolitan series, which is a quartet written by Elena Ferrante, which is a pseudonym. No one knows anything about who the writer actually is, and I find that incredibly intriguing. But as I said, I see this praised all the time. I read a lot of books by women in translation, and it's kind of an epic, I think, set in Naples. So it's set in the 1950s in Naples, and it is about two girls who rely on each other ahead of anything and anyone else. As they grow, their paths repeatedly diverge and converge. Elena and Lila remain best friends whose respective destinies are reflected and refracted in each other. They are likewise the embodiments of a nation undergoing momentous change. So yeah, I really want to read that. I'm going to Italy in October this year, so maybe I will read it then, although I'm not going to Naples, I'm going to Florence, so not quite the right place. And then I have two more non-fictions on this list. I think last time I made this video it was all fiction, and now I have more non-fictions because I feel like I know better what I like in non-fiction, so it's easier to put it on this list, whereas if I haven't read a writer before, the writing can really make or break whether I like a book. But the one that I want to read is What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. So I saw Hannah from Hannah May, her channel, she talked about this book and how much she really loved it, and it really made me want to read it as well. By the age of 30, Stephanie Fu was successful on paper. She had a dream job as an award-winning radio producer at This American Life and a loving boyfriend. But behind her office door, she was having panic attacks and sobbing at her desk every morning. After years of questioning what was wrong with herself, she was diagnosed with complex PTSD, a condition that occurs when trauma happens continuously over the course of years. Both of Fu's parents abandoned her when she was a teenager after years of physical and verbal abuse and neglect. She thought she'd moved on, but her new diagnosis illuminated the way her past continued to threaten her health, relationships and career. In this deeply and thoroughly researched account, Fu interviews scientists and psychologists and tries a variety of innovative therapies. She returns to her hometown in California to investigate the effects of immigrant trauma on the community as she uncovers family secrets in the country of her birth, Malaysia, to learn how trauma can be inherited through generations. She discovers you don't move on from trauma, but you can learn to move with it. So I am intrigued to read that. I have a bit of a hit and miss relationship with memoir. A lot of the time I don't really like it because I just feel like it's not really giving me anything. It's just someone telling their own story, which they are entitled to do, but I don't tend to enjoy. But some memoirs have really stuck with me, like Heavy by Keefe, and so I'm hoping that this one will be not like that, but in that same way will really stick with me. And then the final one is a bit out there for me, but I love marine stuff, non-fiction stuff. Don't watch my review pod, because I did not like that, but all of the David Attenboroughs, it's the Blue Planet is the one that always was my favourite when I was growing up. I love the sea, and The Edge of Darkness, Exploring Light and Life in the Deep Sea by Dr. Edith Whither is one that I'm really intrigued by, really entranced by, love the cover of, really want to try it and hope that I love it. Edith Whither grew up determined to become a marine biologist, but after complications from surgery during college caused her to go temporarily blind, she became fascinated with life as well as the power of optimism. Below the Edge of Darkness explores the depths of the planet's oceans as Whither seeks to understand bioluminescence, one of the most important and widely used forms of communication in nature. In the process, she reveals hidden worlds and a dazzling menagerie of behaviours and animals. Alongside Whither, we experience life and death equipment malfunctions and witness breakthroughs in technology and understanding, all of it set against a growing awareness of the deteriorating health of our largest and least understood ecosystem. So yeah, I'm really intrigued by that. I think it sounds like a really great non-fiction read that is completely different from everything else that I tend to normally read. But I think I could love it if as I've said before, with all of the books, if the writing works for me, the subject matter definitely intrigues me. So I hope I would love it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, like, comment and subscribe, all of that sort of thing. I tend to put out new videos twice a week. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye bye.